Yeah, I did hit that tonight. Okay, we are recording. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for course number 3 in our 4-part series of the ESA's judging course with Erik Krammer from International Surf Services. Erik, thanks for joining us again. We appreciate you being here with us and giving us all this useful information that we have to help our current judges, our potential judges, our competitors, our parents, our volunteers, everybody who is working to make these events happen for the ESA. So with that, I already introduced you last week. I'm going to turn it over because I know you have a lot to cover tonight with priority, and take it away.
Right on. Well, thanks, Michelle. Welcome back, everybody. My name's Erik Krammer. If you're just joining us as your first class of getting to the next level. Last week we covered judging criteria and all the different areas of it, as far as the shortboarding criteria, and we talked about the longboarding criteria, and a little bit about SGP, a little bit about a bodyboard and adaptive. So pretty much covered all the disciplines. I'm super happy to be back presenting again this week, new topics, and according to Michelle, we got some new people online. So I'm super stoked that you guys are here. I've been, presenting this course for a while, and my background comes from being a competitor, from being a judge on the WCT tour for about 11 years. And then I got a bit into coaching on the younger kind of Grom side. And nowadays I do a lot of directing for the ISA, and that led right into the Olympics. So I'm the technical director of the Olympics, which will be running in July. So tonight we are going to talk about priority, and the key word, we talked about interferences, or actually when we talked about judging criteria, the main word that I was probably focusing on was the importance of the word details. And there's so many details when you talk about the judging criteria that really define the quality of the maneuvers. And I can't stress enough, quality maneuvers over quantity of maneuvers. I can't stress enough quality waves over quantity of waves. So the details was the important item for discussion that night. The next one, when we talked about interferences, that was based on interpretation. So whether you interpreted the person had inside position, or you interpreted that the right was superior than the left, there's a lot of dynamics that go down when a judge makes an interference call. So we really went through that, and a lot of understanding and knowledge to, have a basis of the right call. But in reference to the interferences, sometimes something might go down and there's, 2 or 3 different opinions on what happened. And it really comes down to the interpretation of the judge based on his knowledge of the rules to make the call that he feels is right. Now, tonight, when we talk about priority, I think it's really interpretation as well, but that's going to be more interpretation of the priority judge. And the other important word I would say when we talk about priority is evolution. It's, pretty amazing what the priority system has gone through over the last 30 years. Now it's making its way into, a lot of contests across the United States, across the world as well. And when I started judging on the WCT in 1998, we were, using it on the 2-person heats. And the years before I was judging there, they used something called the priority buoy. And that was where it, got started out. And it was basically 2 people, surfing man on man or women on women heats. And they'd be out there, and it would be, non-priority situation, but they had this thing called a priority buoy, and they'd set it out in the middle of the ocean. They usually say 30-second paddle out past the break. And if you paddled around that buoy, then you'd have first priority. And if you paddle around it second, you'd have second priority. And so it was always, people surfing, hassling each other in the break, and then it'd just be a mad scramble for somebody to go out and go around the buoy before the other person get first priority. Now, what basically kind of happened, it was always exciting seeing those paddle battles go down, and the the crazy tactics and, aggressiveness, I guess, that would go down on the other side of the buoy that nobody'd ever really see. I'm sure it was going down. But basically what happened was, as the surfers left the lineup, sometimes they missed the best waves of the heat. And so it became a little bit anticlimactic to see the paddle and see the best, the waves with the best potential not even get ridden in the heat because guys were going for priority. So they changed it a little bit. And so I'm not sure exactly when it was, but I'd say probably around the mid to late 90s, they brought in something called priority allocation. And that's pretty much what they use now today. I mean, I haven't seen a priority buoy used in a long time. So now it's more like an imaginary line through the surf break that establishes where is the primary takeoff zone. And the primary takeoff zone would be, usually where the heat started at, and it's where the majority of the waves are being ridden in the heat. And it's usually where the scoring potential of most waves begins. So that would be the question. That would be the location that the athletes need to return to get their priority. Now with, two-person priority, it was, a lot easier to run, and it ran that way for many years. And it was basically, if two people were in the lineup, one of them took off. When that person got back to the lineup, they had second priority because the other person got first priority as soon as the first and took off. And then it was just basically a rotation. So when you think about the priority system, why was it created? Well, for one, it was created to stop the hassling in the heats. People wanted to see surfing. They didn't want to see, paddling tactics taking control of the heats. So that really kind of cleaned it up. And it was also created to give equal opportunities to the surfers. It wasn't because somebody was, more stronger or more aggressive. It started creating, more of a gentleman's rotation in the water, so that, like I said, it would come down to surfing. And so that was used at the top level of the WCT for many years. And then we figured out a way, I would say it was probably in the mid 2000s, to bring it into more common, like WQS World Qualifying Series heats. And that was when the four-person priority heats were created. And that was just in the beginning, it was like, wow, is this possible? And then as we kept going along, it was like, wow, this is an eye opener. We can use this, and guess what? You can have very organized four-person heats, and people take turns, and it's a surfing contest, not a hassling contest. And then that was only being used on the upper level, on the WSL events, and then ESP back then. And then it started to trickle down. It trickled down into, the USA surfing events, events in Australia. The ISA began using it, and that really created, really professional run events, and the athletes just really brought it in well. And so, like I said, the evolution, that's, there's always something being created, because like I said, it was a two-person system, and then it got adapted to four, but there's always different dynamics that come out every year. The priority head judge is a guy, Ian Buchanan from New Zealand, and I traveled with him on tour for many years, and now he's the priority judge, and he's going crazy every year. Like, he's got a notebook and he's analyzing event per event, and always something else happens that kind of makes you think, like, wow, yeah, that's how that went, but maybe we could do that a little bit better. So I think, at the start of every year, especially if you're competing at the higher level, you really need to look and adapt to your new priority rules, because there's many times changes. At 2019, we had some interesting situations come down in the very last event of the year at Pipeline, and those created, obviously 2020 was a difficult year, didn't run any events until Pipeline again for the WSL, and pretty much, a lot of other events started. But when the new rule books came out for 2021, oh my gosh, there were so many changes within priority, and it was all due to the one situation. We'll talk about it a little bit later, even show a video of it. That would be the Kyle Belli and Gabriel Medina situation. So, everything's constantly in a state of evolution within priority. And like I said, interpretation being from the priority judge. I'll start off, kind of talk about the rules, and then later on I'll go into a little bit of strategy and stuff, and kind of show some videos along the way. So, if you've got any, specific questions or something, you can type it in the chat. Usually I see those, but also at the end of the day today, we'll have a good, question question and answer section to where, if you weren't sure on anything, then we'll definitely get your question answered before we close out. So basically, let me go ahead and share a screen. So talking to Michelle, she's informed me that at the 2019 Easterns, the ESA did use the priority system, which I think is wonderful. It's a step in the right direction. It really shows that an organization is doing their best for their competitors, as far as giving them opportunity to surf, and they're also showing them that upper level that you're going to get at the ESA Easterns. But if you go to qualify for a USA Surfing Prime event, you're going to get priority as well there. Or if you qualify for the US Championships, the NSSA Open, I believe the season there, I know on the West Coast they do, and I think on the East Coast, and I'm sure at the East Coast regionals, they have the priority system there. So as you get more ingrained to a higher level of the system, you really need to understand your rules, because some people are still out there just surfing, and other people know their rules to the finest detail. And the more the more you can use that knowledge to put down more fundamental dynamic heats as a competitor, and as a judge, exactly what to do when you see it. You're not wondering. And kind of before I get into that, I'll talk about just a little bit about the priority judge, because a lot of people think that the judges make the priority calls, but the judges have enough work of their own just trying to watch all the rides up and down the beach, analyze all the maneuvers. The head judge, he's trying to keep all that organized. So there's what we call a priority judge, and he or she is just assigned to the priority. So they're, controlling the priority board, and they're the one making the calls. If they're in doubt about something, or, if they need a break or whatever, then the head judge or a judge on break might be taking it over, but there's an assigned position for that. And unfortunately, I talk from all different, like I said, departments, as far as being a competitor, being a coach on, the lower, younger age, but also directing and just seeing it from all angles. And a lot of times, I see at a lot of events, the most, you fill those judging spots with your best judges because you want the judges throwing scores. And that's a super important position. But a lot of times I see the rookie judge or the new judge being put into the priority judge position because they're not scoring. But for me, the priority judge is so important. It's almost more important than the scoring, because they need to watch every detail, and they can't, as far as the paddles and the positioning and all that. And guess what? They're the only person doing that job. So it is fundamental that they don't mess up. Like if a judge messes up on a score, usually you've got, a high and a low that go out. So, you drop a bad score, usually your score just gets thrown out and the computer system works. But if you make a wrong priority call, that can lead to a resurf. It can lead to a wrong result just based on who should have had priority or not had priority. Now, there's things that are interpretational. Maybe it should have gone to red and it went to white and they were in a tight race or something like that. But when something is truly missed that it affects the result, like I said, that can lead to a resurf. And usually just a bad score by one judge doesn't lead to a resurf. So, I understand why sometimes, the person not with the most experience doesn't go in that position, but I can't stress enough how important that position is for a director to put the right person in that. So without saying how important it is, or without saying much more, I'll get over to the priority rules. So I think as well, I heard some of the divisions at the upcoming ESA regionals are going to be using the priority system as well. And I think that is, just amazing. The quicker you get it, into the system, the more the surfers, the athletes are going to be able to react to it, strategize off of it, and, put in better performances. So basically, I'm going to kind of talk through this, show a few examples along the way and a few experiences and stuff, and keep going from there. So General priority rules. So before priorities have been established between all or any of the competitors, all non-priority interference rules and penalties will apply. So that basically means, you paddle out for your heat. Usually, at those heats, it's a water start. You want, from the very start, when you paddle out for your heat, I encourage everybody to paddle out outside of the area. Don't paddle out straight out through the break. That's disrespecting the competitors that are in the heat itself. Try as hard as you can to paddle out outside of those boundary flags, outside of the field of play, as we call it in the Olympics, outside of the contest area. Because for one thing, you don't want to interfere with somebody in that heat on the way out. You don't want somebody else to do that to you, so you shouldn't do that to them. But another main issue involving priority is when you have a heat already surfing in the water, if you have other colors paddling out in the same area, it's very easy for the priority judge to get confused on which yellow should he be looking at. Which red is mine, the one paddling out or the one, up the beach. So it just gets a little bit confusing. And so remain outside the contest area until that heat ends and then paddle in. Because a lot of times as well, the next heat paddles into the area and now you've got 8 people sitting out the back and you don't know which one to look at on the paddle. And you don't know that, maybe the one paddling for the wave is in the next heat versus this heat. So there's just so much confusion that can be avoided and if the competitors just remain out of the area. So it's the start of the heat now. The previous heat ended, you've paddled in to the lineup. And so everybody, starts from that primary takeoff zone. And so at the start of the heat, there is no priority. It's basically a non-priority part of the heat. And they all start like that. So, you say non-priority interference rules. So you would go back to the class we had last Wednesday, and that talks about the interference rules as far as being inside position, superior direction, chosen direction. All those things come into play. That's why those interference rules are so important to understand, because they always come into play, even in the priority heats, even at the top level in the WSL and the WCT events, in the ESA events, in the Olympics. The beginning of a heat is non-priority rules. So, it comes back down to that. So basically, for heats where priority applies, the priority system will determine which surfer has priority to a wave at that time. So obviously, once priority is put in place, somebody will have a higher priority, somebody will have a lower priority, and the priority surfer has what it says here, surfer with priority has the unconditional right of way and can paddle for and ride any wave they select. So it means, they can backdoor the peak, they can, take off, they can do whatever they want. It's, with a first priority or set with a superior priority over another surfer, you can do whatever you want on that wave. You can use it to, use your priority to surf that wave. You can use your priority to keep another surfer off of that wave. Whatever you select it for, it's yours. The surfer's opponent, the person that doesn't have superior priority, they can paddle for and they can also ride the same wave in any direction and be scored, providing they do not, number one, like we talked about the other day, hinder the scoring potential of the ride for the surfer with priority, or cross in front of or bottom turn around the surfer with priority, regardless if the surfer is up and riding a wave or in the process of catching a wave. So, it basically, says that, I'll close that out for just a second, talk to you guys face to face. So basically it says, surfer with superior priority, unconditional right of way. The other surfer without superior priority, he can ride the same wave. He can, even go in the same direction, or he can go in the other direction. He'll still get scored until the moment that he hinders the scoring potential of the surfer with priority. So, you could drop in and kick out and, maybe it's a half a point ride, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get an interference. But if the surfer with priority has to change their line or do something differently because that other surfer's there, like I said, unconditional right away, they're going to get the interference. And, something I've seen, just like I said, from seeing different sides of it, as a competitor, I know that the judges, they are usually ultra protective of the surfer with priority. And, I would rather err on that side of protecting the person with priority. But, sometimes with the interferences we talked about the other day, I was saying like, yes, there's interference. Yes, there's hindrance, or no, there isn't. And I kept saying, if you're thinking maybe there's hindrance, then it's usually a no call. Now with priority, it's adapted a little bit different. And usually I say the maybes, they almost lead a lot of judges to calling priority interferences. So be careful, when you don't have priority. Like I said, the judges tend to be more protective of the surfers with priority than less protective. And that's just, knowledge that everybody should know. And I think that, just thinking that as well is going to keep heats a lot cleaner and more, like I said, protecting the surfer with a higher priority. There was another, and one of my side stories here. It used to be when I started judging, for example, on the CT tour, it used to be that you couldn't even ride the same wave with the priority surfer. And so, that was to give that surfer unconditional right of way, but it was also to give the judges 100% attention on that ride. Because how it is now, you could have first priority and you're up and riding, but somebody else is going on the same wave up the beach, and the judges still got to do that, their best to watch both waves. Well, it used to be when somebody else took off on the same wave, the person that didn't have priority, they would get a 0. So their score, they might absolutely destroy a wave and they get 0 points. What happened at one of the US Opens one time, it was Rob Machado against Adriano de Souza, and Adriano de Souza surfed right in front of the judging tower, and guess where Rob Machado surfed? He surfed Rob's peak to the south, way up the beach, didn't even surf near Adriano. And every time that Rob had great priority, superior priority, and Adriano was about to take off on a wave, he would drop in for 1 second and kicked out. Technically, they rode the same wave, even though they were like 150 yards apart. Using the rules to, and understanding the rules, using them to your advantage, but Adriano would go and he'd surf the wave, kill it all the way to the beach, be getting a 7 and an 8, and Rob would drop in on the same wave and kick out and basically nullify his wave, and Adriano could not figure out why his scores kept coming out 0. And so I think the next year they changed that rule. So that's, I say, constant evolution. Trying to do the best for the surfers. So that's how it used to be. But like I said, now how it is you can ride the same wave, just as long as you don't hinder the scoring potential of the surfer with priority. So let me go ahead and got a couple of videos lined up for you guys. I've been pulling a lot of videos just off the WSL things online. There's a lot of interesting ones on there. Let me go ahead and pull this one up for you guys. Let's see. Bear with me while I toggle in and out of Zoom screen share and whatnot. This would be, let's see, wave looks pretty good, huh? This one would be 2013, and this would be Kelly Slater versus Joel Parkinson. This would be the famous one. This is the finals of the Quicksilver Pro. Kelly Slater had a 10, Joel Parkinson had a 10, and it was basically coming down to the best backup wave. Like I said, priority is used to put yourself on good waves, get good scores, but also at the same time, it can be used as a tool to control the surfers that have a lower priority. And that's pretty much, the combination, wanting the good wave, but also wanting your fellow competitors not to get it. That's basically what this example of. So you can see red, Joel Parkinson, he's taken off on just one heck of a Kira barrel. And you're going to see Slater, basically it's a 2-person heat. Red, Joel Parkinson has second priority. I think he, probably caught a wave, got whipped around on the jet ski. So he was further up the point, and Slater was farther down the point, but hadn't caught a wave. So he was second priority. So you can kind of see what happens. Joel Parkinson takes off, just about to get absolutely shacked. He's setting himself up probably for another 10-point ride. Wasn't too happy that he saw Slater coming down the line. And Slater basically dropped in, picked up where Joel left off. And then obviously he continued to go down the line and get a super high excellent score. So probably not as good as, Joel's was going to be if Joel had made that barrel. And that was the difference there. Slater went on to win the event. So. But they were both pretty stoked because they shared epic barrels at Kira that day. So that would be one example, like I said, how you use that priority. The judges are going to give priority to surfer that's been in the takeoff zone first or longer after the other surfer catches the wave, and you can use it, like I said, to your advantage to catch waves and also to keep the other surfers off. Now here in the interference rules, I mentioned something. The first part on these 2 bullets here: hinder the scoring potential of the ride for the surfer with priority. Here's another one: cross in front of or bottom turn around the surfer with priority, regardless if the surfer is up and riding a wave or in the process of catching a wave. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky one. In the one of the Bells Beach events, I forget what year it was, but I'm going to show the video in a minute. It was Jordy Smith versus Italo Ferreira. And for me in this situation, there was no hindrance to scoring potential, but as it's written in the rule book, it says cross in front of or bottom turn around the surfer with priority. Now, it was kind of a, let me go ahead and pull up this video while I talk. It was kind of a weird situation because kind of like Joel and Slater, Italo was further up the point, but he's further up the point with whoops. He's further up the point with second priority, and Jordy was farther down the line. 1 second here. So let me go ahead and show you basically what happens. And this is one where I would say, well, this didn't really matter on hindrance to scoring potential. This mattered that it was written in the rule book that if you have a low priority, you can't cross in front of or bottom turn around the surfer with priority, even if they're just paddling for the wave. So the judges just went right by the rule book. So Italo's up and riding, Jeep leader jersey, and there goes Jordy turning, stuck in the white water. Italo's out, but guess what? He crossed in front of the surfer with priority. So very unfortunate here. Like I said, for me, hindrance to scoring potential didn't really matter. Seems a bit unfair, but the rules are the rules. This one really pushed the rules to the definition of it. So you can see Jordy paddling. He's stuck in the white water. If you took Italo off that wave, definitely Jordy would have gotten the score. So, a few different angles here. This might have actually been the next wave. Yeah, it was. So let me go ahead and stop share there. So that would just be basically, like I said, going back to your rules. You can't cross over. I normally show that one a little bit later, but since it was right there in the text, I decided to pull that one up. So the priority judge will make any call on priority, and they use a colored display system corresponding to the color of the surfer's competition jersey in the water to indicate priority, and may consult the judging panel for close calls. Like I said, priority judge does it by himself, but if he's in doubt, he'll ask the head judge or the judges, hey boys, what do you think about this one? So basically, if a surfer is not in the primary takeoff zone when the heat starts, and if that surfer arrives late, the surfer will be allocated the appropriate priority position as determined by the priority judge at the time when the surfer reaches the primary takeoff zone. So if you're late to the heat, it doesn't mean when you get out there, you're going to get automatic first priority. If this priority order is already established, you're going to get it as if you were returning from a wave. It's, you can't fault the rest of the competitors because you were late. You're going to get your priority as you reach the takeoff zone. Here's another interesting one. If a surfer rides a wave prior to the start of the heat, that surfer will be allocated the lowest priority position in the heat. So usually, there's a little bit of a break between the heats, 20, 30 seconds is usually pretty good. So if you take off before your heat, for one thing, that wave doesn't score because it was before the heat. And when that heat does start, you should be starting with last priority, fourth priority, third priority, however many were in the heat, you get last priority. So we go ahead and move down the line. Allocation is based on who the priority judge believes has reached the primary takeoff zone first. In cases where surfers appear to reach the primary takeoff zone at the same time, priority will go to the surfer who did not have the last priority. So usually, as a priority judge, you have every now and then you'll have two surfers in there just, looking over at each other, and they're scratching to get back out. They basically want to reach the primary takeoff zone before the other one, because that gives them superior priority over that other person. That gives them the next choice. Maybe there's already a couple of people out there and they're, hassling over third and fourth priority, but, eventually their higher priority might come up, or if a wave comes to that third and fourth priority person, it's going to be their right of way on that. So if they're paddling back out and they basically, as a priority judge, it helps a lot, especially in beach break conditions. Sometimes you're in a scaffolding or you've got a little bit of an angle and you're looking at the swell line. I mean, occasionally the swell line comes from, more from the north or more from the south. But in general, kind of when the waves reach the beach, at least they have somewhat of a straight line. And so you're kind of watching the surfers come over those lines when they're that close, and that's really helps you gauge who is in the front, if you can't figure it out. And so, sometimes it might come down to, just, one arm over arm. But if it's that close that you're like, wow, they're so close, I can't really tell, then the priority judge will say, okay, who had the higher priority last? Who caught the last wave? Those are the two factors that are going to enter in the priority judge's mind. And, if the person that had priority last, well, they're not going to get priority over the other person. I want to try to make it, like I said, the goal of priority is to try to give everybody equal opportunity. So if you give the guy that, if it's a tie and you give the guy who had last priority, the higher priority, then it's not really quite fair. So, in the tie situation, you're just trying to make the best out of it, be the fairest for the athletes. Back to my share screen. So let's see. Once a heat has ended, all priority ceases. If a surfer is riding on a wave as the heat ends, they can't be interfered with by any surfer, even if that surfer had higher priority before that heat ended. If an interference occurs, the violating surfer will receive a priority situation interference. So basically, this one is a little bit complicated. And hey, Chip, how's it going? Good to see you too. So basically with the priority, like I said, it's a little bit complicated at the end of the heat. And I see a lot of surfers not quite knowledgeable, and they're still trying to control right to the very seconds of the heat. Basically, you can analyze this one a lot easier with 2 people, but it can happen with 4 people as well. Basically, you have priority, but your priority ends with the heat. When the horn blows, when that first siren starts, it's the end of the heat. So if you have priority, your priority ends right then. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but every now and then you see it, and it's usually a couple of gaps between years, and it's almost like even athletes at the top level fall victim to it. I've seen it happen in the USA Surfing Primes. I've seen it, happen all the way up onto the WCT level. And usually it happens, and then it doesn't happen for years because people remember it, and then you get a new group in. So basically what happens is you have a surfer with higher priority, and they're coming in right on that buzzer beater wave, trying to control the guy that has the lower priority. But guess what? The person with the lower priority stands up, their hands leave the rail, so it's a ride. And then right after the horn blows, the person with priority gets up to block them out. But guess what? If the person with higher priority got up after the horn started, they don't have priority anymore. So that person with lower priority now has priority over the person that's standing up on them after the heat. So it's a really, really fine line, and it's really important. That's why it's great for the commentator to be counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're watching that exactly happen at that moment. I do have a video. Let's see if I can pull it up. Oops, 1 second here. I got to open it first. So it's a really technical one, like I said, and it comes down to I don't know if I'll be able to show this one full screen or not. The title on this one, because I couldn't find the normal video, the title on this one on the search was "How to Lose a Heat After the Buzzer." Pretty interesting. So I'm going over a couple, fine details of priority almost in the start, because they're at the top of my list. And then we're going to come down with more of the foundation of it. Let's see. I don't know if that'll work full screen, so I'll just show it basically here. So if you guys can see it, it's a little bit small. Oops, let me get rid of these heads here. So basically you can see Chloe Andino is in red. He's on the shoulder, and I think it's Pat, yeah, right there, Pat Kadauskis. He's a little bit deeper on the peak. So basically how this is coming down to the end of the heat, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And basically Kadauskis gets up with the low priority, and then Chloe gets up just after it. And so he lost his priority when the heat ended. And then Chloe gets up, goes down the line, launches a little bit of air. And guess what? He got a priority interference because his priority died with the end of that heat. So, just a really fine detail there. We're starting with the fine details first. And like I said, then we're going to go into the fundamentals. So a little bit reverse order tonight. So let's see, where are we? Yeah, now starts the basics of it. So priority display system. Internationally, there's pretty much 3 established priority display systems. You have a manual slide board system, which is very, foundational, fundamental. You have a manual rotating cubes. And then you also have, at the highest level, the automated LED electronic display board. The electronic display board is, in my opinion, by far the superior one, but you need to have big enough LEDs and strong enough that, the surfers can see it. And obviously it is, electronic, so it will go down. And if it does go down, you need to have a backup plan. The backup plan might be shutting down priority, but if you can have a manual slide board as your backup plan, then that's probably the best way to go about it. So with all the display systems, basically if it's vertical, top to bottom, then the order of priority is from the top to the bottom. So for example, let me go ahead and pull up one of my photos here. So let's see what happens here. So this is one of the ISA events. This would be the 2019 World Juniors in Huntington Beach. And this is, actually a really good breakdown of the contest site, the technical side of it. So you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the numbers 1, 2, 3X. That would be the priority board. And so this would be the electronic LED. And so like those work vertically from top to bottom. So the color on the top is the highest priority, and on down, color red and color below it, second priority, third priority on down. It's nice as well because they work with colors and numbers. So obviously, if your color's at the top, well, you have the higher priority, but just to even confirm it even more, you get a number on it, 1, 2, 3. So you're really looking not only where you are, but you're looking at who is above you, because those are the athletes that if you're competing, those are the ones you need to be careful of. Those are the ones you need to give way. Everybody else in the heat, well, you can control them. Now you see the X in this box at the bottom. Well, if you look, there's red, white, and yellow, but you don't see a blue up there. For me, that means means a few different things. It could mean it's only a 3-person heat, so that box just goes X the whole time. Or what's more likely, since it's an ISA event which runs all 4-person heats, unless somebody doesn't show in the first round or something, it probably means that blue caught a wave and that color is paddling back out and they haven't reached the takeoff zone yet. That's basically how that works. So white, first priority, second priority, third priority, on down. And usually that is, attached to the judge's tower or somewhere near it, so that the athletes can see that pretty easily. I'll show another example here of the slide board. And this is basically the same event. And basically when our electronic system went down, electronics every now and then, they do go down. So you need to have a backup thing in place. A lot of the slide boards sometimes are just blocks over the railing, and the surfers need to understand where they are. But If you can have a tarp like this that you throw them over, this is even better, because now you can establish a number to it. And how it was before, if you caught a wave in the beginning of the heat, when you returned to the lineup, your color went down, but your color might have been the only one up there. That didn't mean you had first priority, which I've seen confuse people like that. It meant you had fourth priority and nobody else had a wave yet. So if you can assign the numbers in your backup system, or if this is your primary system, this is, a really great and, fairly cheap one to use. You just need a good, backdrop with, some numbers and X's and the wooden panels to throw over the edge. So that's, a really great one to see. I could have pulled it up. NSSA and, how a lot of the systems used to use in the beginning, they use cubes that basically spin, and they're kind of like on a peg. It used to be the cubes were from top to bottom, but, I think the cube system has kind of been done away with. But the NSSA still uses one, and those cubes are set up down the line. So when the priority orders, like I said, top to bottom, the highest priorities are always at the top. And when the priority set, left to right, horizontally, then priority is always left to right. I always say it's like you're reading a book. You're going to start at the left, which is first priority, and then go down the line, 1, 2, 3, 4. I know the NSSAs, they're a little bit hard to see because they're basically spinning a 5-sided pentagon. And I always say, like, if you're way up the beach, or if you're straight on, you see your colors perfectly. And if you're way up the beach, you're not seeing 4 colors, you're seeing the side of another pentagon, you're basically seeing 8 colors. So a little bit complicated at times. And like I said, you just really need to try to analyze what's straight in front of you. But those are basically the systems. Like I said, the manual slides, the LED lights, or the cubes that are being used. So those, like I said, colors relate to the color of the jersey that each athlete is wearing. So something else really important, once priority has been established, it is the surfer's responsibility to check the priority system for their priority position at all times. This one, I can't stress enough to, it's not really the responsibility of the judges. This is the responsibility of the athletes. And you need to constantly be looking up and seeing, oh, did it change? Oh, did that person paddle enough? It's like I said, it's interpretational. So you need to look up and see what the priority judge is dictating to the heat as the priority order. Because sometimes you think, oh, yeah, he paddled too much, I should have priority, or I didn't paddle enough, I didn't lose priority. Doesn't matter what you think or what you think happened up the beach. It's what the priority judge thinks. And if anything goes down, the call is going to go based on what the cubes, what the blocks say. So whether you agree with it or not, I would say that is the law and you need to go by it. Like I said, occasionally there is mistakes, and if it leads to a wrong result, then there can be things resurfaced, but it's got to be something that really affects the result. But normally, like I say, as an athlete, always check, because there's so many times people do not look at the board and it's been up there for a long time and they just do what they thought was right and not exactly what the block said. And there's a lot of examples of that, all the way up to the highest level as well. Can probably, I'll go ahead and show you one already. And this would be the Kiowa Belly and Medina one, but not in pipeline like everybody probably wants to talk about. This would be the one that, let me go ahead and start to X out some of these videos I've already showed. This would be the one in Portugal, basically about a month before. Oops, there we go. Share my screen. And so this would basically be, you see this situation coming up. Sorry, get rid of these people here. And you see, the dark, I think it's blue or black, has the inside position, and Gabriel Medina's a little farther on the shoulder. It seems pretty obvious, like, Medina should know yellow should know that blue has higher priority, because the judges didn't flip it. Like, the priority board was saying black first priority, yellow second priority. It was like that for a couple of minutes. And Medina paddled back and forth in the line up and down on the beach. I think actually Abeli was surfing up the beach and then came near him. But the priority board was saying black priority over yellow for a couple of minutes. And Medina never even looked at the board. And, you know, world title on the line, he could have wrapped it up here at this event. And so basically that's what happened. You know, basically yellow had the higher, black had the higher priority, paddled into the wave, you know, kind of got bumped, hindered his entry line. They called a priority interference on Medina. A little bit of a different angle. I mean, with the priority, it's a pretty obvious one. You don't want to hassle the guy with priority. You don't want to be bumping rails, things like that. Just a little bit too close. But like I said, this black priority over yellow, it wasn't like they threw it up at the last minute and Medina didn't look up. It was up there for a couple minutes and it cost him the heat and it probably cost him the world title eventually. So like I said, you know, pause him there in mid jump. So like I said, I can't stress enough to not look at the board. It was kind of funny. I was, like I said, I do some coaching as well. I'm directing at the top level with the ISA and the Olympics and stuff, but I do a lot of coaching with the kids that are kind of in that like 11 to 14-year-old age. So I was working with an athlete this weekend in the USA Prime, and it was at Churches, and it was the final seconds of the heat, and primary takeoff zone was out the back, and my athlete was in third place. He was paddling back out, and the athlete who was in second place was on the inside too, but they were kind of far out, but they weren't in the primary takeoff zone. And so this other athlete in second place thought that he had second priority. He assumed he did. He thought, I'm in the takeoff zone. I'm out here. I'm sitting here. But the priority judge never gave him priority. So he was sitting there with no priority. Then when my athlete got to him, they started paddling side by side up the beach, both with no priority. And then my athlete paddled on the outside line, and then they paddled out a little bit further. And this is in the final 10 seconds of the heat. They paddled it out a little bit farther. And when they passed that line, my surfer was farther out, and they gave him the higher priority. And then a wave came, and my athlete at the same time never looked at the board in the final seconds. And this guy was going on him no matter what. So it's, like I said, it happens at all levels, you know, so always check the board. Let's see, pull this back up for you. So let's see, priority interference penalties. Let me see. Before I want to talk about penalties and excessive hassling, I will just talk a little bit about how it, you know, basically works. I'll start right off with the force surfer heat priority. So priority force surfer heat priority works in the following manner. You know, I want to focus on this one because if you understand the force surfer heat priority, you're going to understand the 3, you're going to understand the 2. So at the start of the heat, once again, nobody has priority. So the first surfer, and if nobody has priority, guess what? You can paddle for as many waves as you want and not lose your priority. So normally if you take off on a wave or you paddle for it and miss it, you lose your priority. But at the start of the heat, nobody has priority. So usually I say, you know, if you don't have something, you can't lose what you don't have. At the start of the heat, nobody has priority. So if you paddle for a wave and miss it, you don't lose your priority. You don't lose your non-priority. So you can paddle for as much as you want. So the first surfer to ride a wave, as soon as they return to the primary takeoff zone, it's not just because they rode the first wave, they got to get back in the lineup. They receive 4th priority. They were the first surfer to ride. The remaining 3 surfers in the heat, they have priority over that first surfer that took off. And those 3 surfers can paddle for waves without losing their priority because once again, they don't have priority. Amongst each other, non-interference rules apply, but amongst that surfer that already rode a wave, all 3 of them have a higher priority. Now, for example, the next surfer takes a ride. We'll call him the second surfer. He catches a wave, and when he returns to the primary takeoff zone, now he has fourth priority, and the person that was the first surfer to ride, they move up to third priority. So now you have two people in the lineup. They both don't have priority. Amongst each other, non-priority rules apply, and they can still paddle for as many waves as they want and miss and not go without losing their priority. Once again, they don't have priority, so they can't lose it. But they have a higher right of way over the surfers with third and fourth priority. And then comparing the third and fourth priority, obviously the one with third has priority over the one with fourth. So a couple different dynamics going down as far as the surfers with non-priority over the surfers with priority. But this, if it sounds confusing to you because it's the first time you heard it, when you see it happen, it all makes sense. When you hear it and somebody's trying to explain it to you or you're reading about it, it sounds a little bit complicated. But when you see it all go down for the first time, whether it's, in a heat you're watching or online or whatever, it really starts to make sense. So now you get down to the remaining two surfers in the heat who have not caught waves. They have priority over the first and second surfer. They may paddle for waves without losing the priority until the next surfer catches a wave, and we'll call him the third surfer. When that third surfer returns to the primary takeoff zone, now he's going to get fourth priority. The fourth moves up to third. The third moves up to second. And guess what? This third, I'll just go ahead and read it. Once the third surfer catches a wave, the initial heat priority is established. The surfer yet to catch a wave receives first priority. I call it first priority by default because everybody else went on a wave and he's like the last one left to not catch a wave. And so once the bottom ranking of that priority is established, now the first person left without a wave is going to have first priority by default. But guess what? Before they could paddle for as many waves as they wanted and miss them. But now that they have first priority, they have something they can lose. If they paddle for and miss a wave, they go to last priority. So it's super important to understand this rule, especially for surfers just beginning to use it, because if you end up with first priority by default, it means you haven't caught a wave yet. And if you paddle for a wave and you miss it, now it's like you go to the back of the line and not only are you last priority, but you're last priority and you don't even have a wave yet, and probably everybody else does. So you really need to make sure you're going to take a wave if you're going to, paddle for it and lose your priority. So, what's really most important is not the order that the surfers ride the waves, but it's the order that they return to the takeoff zone. Then it says first surfer with first priority has priority over all other surfers. Surfer with second priority has priority over the surfers with third and fourth priority. The surfer with third priority only has priority over the surfer with fourth priority, or a surfer with no priority, something like that. If the surfer is not in the primary takeoff zone when the heat starts, I mentioned this one before, and arrives late, the surfer will be allocated the appropriate priority position as determined by the priority judge at the time when the surfer reaches the primary takeoff zone. So that's pretty much, how the four-person priority system works. Like I said, three-person, the exact same, except you take one person out of that mix. Two-person, pretty much the same, except it's just a rotation amongst two people. With the paddling for and missing a wave, if you're in a higher priority and you paddle for and miss a wave and everybody else is in the takeoff zone, you go to the back of the line. Now in the two people heats, you paddle for and miss a wave, you basically drop from first priority to second priority, which can be a huge mistake at times, but it's not as huge a mistake as in a four-person heats. You might have to wait for everybody else. And if it's inconsistent or something like that, it can really have, a detrimental effect on your heat. Let's see. I was going to say something, but I'll save it when I talk more about strategy and things like that. So like I said, the other day, in some of our last classes with Michelle, you guys are going to get basically a manual after the fourth class that I'll send over to you guys. And it's going to have, all the different judging criteria, interferences, all the priority rules. And so it'll all be in there for you guys to look at. a couple of dynamics that I wanted to talk about. There are some wave priority, let's say, exceptions. So, right here, in general, wave priority is lost as soon as a surfer rides a wave or makes a committed paddle to catch a wave and misses that wave. That's pretty much what we were just talking about. But in 3 surfer or 4 surfer heats, if you're a surfer with lower priority and you paddle alongside a surfer with higher priority, who then catches the wave, the paddling surfer will retain their priority amongst the other surfers in the takeoff zone. So that's, that was a new rule addition, I think in 2018 or 19. And it basically, when priority first came out, it was like, if you paddled for a wave and you missed it, and it didn't matter whether somebody else paddling for the wave with you or not. So sometimes you might be, 3rd priority and you're paddling for a wave, and then all of a sudden the guy with 1st priority comes along and starts to paddle for a wave. Well, as soon as 1st priority goes, it used to be, well, 3rd paddled too. So you would lose priority, but then it was like, well, that's not really fair. 3rd was actually paddling for the wave and wanted it, but he or she couldn't go because 1st priority was going. So then they revised that rule, and now it's, if you're in a low priority and you paddle next to someone with superior priority, and that superior priority takes the wave, then you just, keep whatever priority order you were. So if you were in 2nd priority paddling with the 1st priority person, that 1st priority is now gone, and guess what? Now you're 1st priority, and so you just move up. Now there's few, dynamics within this as well. Like, say I saw it happen in this weekend. Somebody's like, well, why didn't they lose priority? So, a situation like I talked about basically is talking about when the surfers are going in the same direction. One surfer is kept off because of the surfer with higher priority. Now, for example, what I saw this weekend was, and I've seen it before, but I had to explain it to somebody. It was like 2 surfers were paddling on the same peak, and one had high priority and one had low priority. And basically, the surfer with low priority was paddling for the right, and the surfer with higher priority was paddling for the left. But the person with low priority paddled and pulled back because the other surfer was on the wave, but they went the opposite direction. So it wasn't like the high priority kept the low priority off the wave. So it's usually when that happens. If the wave was open to ride, then you're going to lose your priority. But like I said, it comes down to the interpretation of the priority judge. So just some fine details in there that's, fine details make or break heats. So the more knowledge you guys have, the better you're going to be able to perform, or the better you're going to be able to do as the priority judge. So then letter B as well, pretty much kind of down the same lines. In 3 surfer or 4 surfer heats, if a surfer with lower priority is paddling for a wave and is blocked by a surfer with higher priority who does not catch the wave, the paddling surfer will retain their priority amongst the other surfers in the takeoff zone, and the blocking surfer will receive last priority. So it's pretty much the same idea that I just talked about. Not so much 2 surfers splitting a peak, but 2 surfers wanting to go in the same direction. And the surfer with a higher priority paddles, but he paddles enough to keep the other surfer off, either intentionally or not intentionally. But if it keeps the other surfer off, well, the surfer that was paddling with low priority, he remains his priority order. And the surfer who blocked the other surfer used his priority, then they're going to go to last priority in the system. So that's kind of where that lie rules. Once again, just trying to make it fair, trying to create equal opportunity for the athletes. So the blocking rule in priority situations, priority surfer will lose priority if, in the opinion of the head judge or priority judge, they paddle in front of the non-priority surfer to deliberately impede them from catching a wave. So, like I said, that priority surfer can do whatever they want with their priority. They can paddle, they can block out the person that has the lower priority. But if they do so, then they're going to lose that priority. If they catch the wave, fine. They lost their priority anyway. But if they just paddle in front of them, which deliberately keeps that other surfer off the wave, then they use their priority basically as a block. You can also position yourself in the takeoff zone to prevent another surfer from catching a wave. And you can also use their priority by either paddling for or taking off on a wave to block their opponent when the surfer with priority appears to have no intention to score. In this situation, priority can be awarded regardless of which surfer reaches the takeoff zone after the ride. So basically in those last two, basically you can be a surfer with higher priority. And like I said, with that first one, you can paddle in front of them and blocks them out. Or you can be, down the line with higher priority, and the surfer with low priority is, looks like they want to take off on that wave. And just because the surfer down the line is positioning on that wave, the hands don't even have to move. Like normally it's a paddle and a miss, but if you position yourself on a wave, which keeps another surfer off, then you're going to use your priority on that. So just, some of the finer details in that rule. Now, for example, you can even have a situation where you can have a surfer with higher priority and lower priority, and the surfer, say it's a 2-person heat, or there's only 2 people in the lineup. The surfer with higher priority paddles for the wave and misses it. And then the surfer with lower priority now has higher priority because that other person missed it. And they keep paddling for the same wave and they miss it too. And guess what? Priority then goes back to the surfer with first priority. So it's kind of like a flip-flop situation. The person with first priority paddled and missed it. And on the very same wave, the surfer with lower priority paddled and missed it. And so then it passed back to that first person. That's, of course, if there's only 2 people in the lineup or it's a 2-person heat. Let's see, suspended priority. So one of the other things, suspended priority. This, doesn't get used very often because it really, certain kind of waves would bring out this situation. But if a surfer with superior priority paddles outside the primary takeoff zone and sits on the inside position, they will have their priority suspended until they re-enter the primary takeoff zone. So basically what this is saying, you're sitting in the lineup, it's deemed the primary takeoff zone. If you come to the inside farther down the line and you're outside of this primary takeoff zone, then you will lose your priority. And it's basically so you just can't go on the inside and decide to drop in on, the next surfer that comes down the line. You can move to the inside, because there is a, takeoff zone that has an inside part versus an outside part. But if you completely leave that zone, the priority judge is going to, normally it doesn't always happen, but it's their interpretation as far as when you leave that, but they can suspend your priority until you re-enter the takeoff zone. If the surfer never re-enters the primary takeoff zone, then they're no longer the priority surfer. Priority judge will determine the surfer's new priority position in the heat. All attempts will be made to verbally announce the priority surfer as they start to leave the primary takeoff zone by a verbal warning via the PA system. Let's see, at the discretion of the priority, it talks about, if a surfer's equipment is damaged and they actively make their way to get their replacement board, or I've seen it, the waves are so big that the surfers are out in the primary takeoff zone and then a giant set comes through and just cleans them up, washes them all the way to the beach. I remember, head judging a women's WCT in Europe, and it was so giant. We didn't have this rule of suspension of priority in place, and the girls got washed all the way to the beach, and they were basically running up the beach, holding on to first priority until they could get back out, and they still had first priority. But now there's a priority suspension, so when you're washed out by giant waves, then it'll be no priority on the board. And then once the surfers get back to that takeoff zone, then it's the priority judges, position to give them back the previous order that was in place. And once again, the beach announcer is trying to facilitate that communication as well, because sometimes it's just really hard to show what's going on with just, LED lights and blocks. So the more communication, the better. let's talk about priority interference penalties, because we've done a lot of talk about, the rotation of the priority system. And well, yeah, so basically in a normal interference, if you receive an interference, you lose half of your second scoring wave. Now that's, not too big a deal. I talked about the other night, a girl winning a national title with 2 interferences. What happens when you get 2 non-priority interferences? Your first best wave gets cut in half and your second best wave gets cut in half. So, you can still come back from those, pretty rare. But when you get a priority interference, especially at the upper level, it's usually the end of the heat. Because what happens, you lose all of your second best scoring wave. So that wave is basically becomes a 0. So make sure if a surfer incurs an interference penalty, well, first of all, they lose priority. Priority judge will determine new priority position of the surfers in the heat. Interfering surfer's ride will be scored as a 0, and they will lose their entire second scoring ride. So what happens on a high level like the WCT? If your second scoring ride is a 0, well, what's a perfect score on your best ride? A 10. What are the heat totals usually in WCT events? Way more than 10 points. So a lot of times, I saw it in an ESA event. It was in the Azores in 2016 or something, and it was Samuel Pupo, Miguel's younger brother, and he was surfing in this heat, and crazy airless, just pulls out the most amazing ones, full rotations, just was pretty dynamic for 2016. And he's going through the heat, he's surfing pretty well. He's got, an 8.5, he gets a 9, he gets a priority interference. Pretty, interpretational one. I didn't think he should have gotten personally the call, but the majority called priority interference. So he got, he was actually with a priority interference and sitting on a 9, he was still in advancing position because the other surfer had like a 4 and a 4.5, adds up to 8.5. He had a 9 on one wave. So what happened? He kept surfing in the heat. Guess what he started going for? Giant aerials. So he gets the 9 and he busts out an even crazier one, gets like a 9.8. It was one of the best waves of the event, but he's carrying a 0 as his backup because he got a priority interference. He keeps surfing in the heat, trying to better the 9.8, push it up to a 10. But as soon as the other guy dropped like a 5.5 or 6 or something, he came in, just came right to the beach because he knew the other guy got a 6 and a 4.5. That's more than 10 points. And he was sitting on a 9.9, and there's no way he could get more than 10 points. So you see a lot of those guys just come in kind of like accept defeat, I guess. So pretty detrimental when you get a priority interference. That's why I say be really sure of checking the board, really make sure you have control of the competitor that you're going to take right of way over. In a heat with priority has not been allocated between 2 surfers and an interference occurs, the interfering surfer will be penalized under the normal interference rules. That's what I talked about, non-interference rules, non-priority interference. The surfer's ride will be scored as a 0, and they will lose half of their second scoring ride. Priority interference may be called by the head judge and or priority judge as one of the panel to reach a majority decision. Only if the majority of the judging panel did not see the incident or there was no clear footage. So that was basically what I said. Priority judge is going to make the call, but if there's no clear footage or is unsure, then the priority judge will look to the other judges to help them out. Excessive hassling in priority situations for all events with a priority judge. In the opinion of the priority judge and head judge, if a surfer excessively hassles, blocks, or hinders another surfer from paddling in the lineup, they will be allocated the lowest priority applicable at the time. If the behavior is aggressive or unsportsmanlike, then an interference or disqualification may also be called for unsportsmanlike conduct. So let's see, where am I at? So, you can see basically where it's kind of going to, people are competitors. They want to get through heats. So obviously the, priority interference is very detrimental. We saw at the end of 2019, use of priority. And, I really encourage athletes to understand the rules and use them to their, advantage, but at the same time, following the rules in the rule book, because some situations push sportsmen, unsportsmanship like conduct to an interpretation level for the judges and the committees that look over that as well. Within, I talked about excessive hassling on that last part of the page I was looking at. How it's written, I think within, a lot of rule books, is there's excessive hassling, and, it's within grounds of not being, unsportsmanship like conduct or unsafe if it's in flat water. Like if you're a priority surfer and you're blocking somebody out from paddling up the beach or whatever, you're going to lose your priority on it. If you're a lower priority surfer and you're blocking the surfer with priority from paddling up the beach, that can result in a priority interference. So you see the difference. You're using your priority to impede somebody's path up the beach. Well, you lose your priority, and then all of a sudden that person has a higher priority. So it's almost like they're free to go. Now, if you're the lower priority and you're blocking somebody out, excessive hassling, you have the low priority, and you can't really hinder that person's path up the beach or into a wave, because that can result, like I say, in a priority interference. I'll go ahead and let me get my screen ready for another video here. We showed, well, go ahead and X that one out. I had another one that I was going to show you guys. Forgot to show it a few minutes ago. But while I've got it up, we'll just pull it up. It involves Mr. Gabriel Medina and Mr. Kelly Slater. And this was at Pipeline a couple of years ago. Not the prettiest scene, but it was Gabriel Medina, like I said, very competitive athlete. And he had higher priority over Kelly. You can look at the situation. Basically, Gabriel's in red, Kelly's in blue. Kelly's getting like a really good barrel on this wave coming down the line, and Gabriel has higher priority, drops in on him. Gabriel could have just kept going on the wave, but it was an attempt to stop Kelly from riding the wave, and he almost steered towards him, which he had the higher priority. So, the judges, in my recollection, didn't call interference on Gabriel because Slater didn't really hinder Gabriel's ride. Gabriel decided to go straight just to keep Kelly off of it. But like I said, this is pushing the limits to the maximum, really making the judges think. So I think they show this one again. Yeah, Slater's getting a good barrel. He just basically drops in, decides to steer over towards him. Not exactly the most polite thing to do. But like I said, it is a sport. It is a game. People are going to find out, really, really want to win. So, the judges needed to really look at this one and be like, okay, did Slater's ride hinder the scoring potential of Medina? No. Did Slater, cross in front of or bottom turn around Gabriel? No. So they're probably not going to call, a priority interference on Kelly. Now, Gabriel could have kept going on this wave, but just to make sure Slater wouldn't go any farther, he pretty much went straight and, even went that way. So definitely pushing it. This was probably a weird discussion up in the judging tower. And of course, this one went viral very quickly around the world, like they usually do. And, somebody commented, Medina is in a lot of videos. Yes, it is kind of funny. I've gone and done my research looking for, different examples to show you guys. And when you type in interference WSL Medina, he does come up in at least half of them. But like I said, amazing competitor, really, has more passion probably than anybody on tour and more drive to win, but it's kind of a win at all costs. And so that, kind of attitude will get you the win. But it created a situation at the end of 2019, which I saw it happen. I wasn't on the beach, but I was watching it online when it happened. And, the first thing I thought was, wow, amazing mastery and knowledge of the game. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, that's really ugly and unsportsmanship like conduct, and kind of goes away from the whole reason we have priority. And that's to create equal opportunity for everybody to ride waves. So I'll go ahead and pull that one up. You know, everybody's probably seen it, but just to refresh your mind, this is, you know, round of 16. So getting down there, basically, you know, it was a kind of, you can actually even see the scores up there. Gabriel and Medina have 4.23 and a 2.07. Kyle Belli had a 0.63 and a 0.5. So it was just that kind of a day at Pipeline, not very good. And so Kyle Belli had first priority. Gabriel had second. You know, you see other surfers up here because they're having a crossover heat or two heats are overlapping, but don't pay too much attention to that. That's a whole nother dynamic. But basically, you can look up here, 46 seconds left. So it's the final, it's within the final 5 minutes of the heat for one thing. And so Medina sitting on a 4.23 and a 2.07. This wave is one of the better waves of the heats. You know, if Kyle gets, let's see, you know, say, do my math really quick, gets like a 6-point ride on this heat, which it fully had the potential, he would take Gabriel out of this. His 6 with his 0.63 is going to add up to what more than what Medina's got. But Medina, along with, you know, his coach Charlie, figured out really quick that if Medina drops in on a belly intentionally and keeps a belly off from getting that 6, Belly is going to get another 1-point ride, if that. Medina's going to get a priority interference, and so that 2.07 has become a 0. And then Medina's going to paddle back out and get first priority and control the final 30 seconds of the heat. So that's exactly what happened. So the whole world just went, oh my God. If you know, listen to the commentary, they're like, what has he done? He did it again. And it's like, no, this one was a little bit more thought out. And so, you know, it was definitely intentional. Let me go ahead and they're going to show that again, but they got the blocks over it. It was definitely intentional. Gabriel went through that heat because there wasn't a lot of rules in place of it. And then basically what happened in the year following, COVID happened. So there was no 2020 season. So WSL had a lot of time to review this. Me and my technical board had a lot of time to review this. You know, my first thought, like I said, was like, wow, amazing mastery of the game. And part of me was like going, that was really ugly though. That wasn't why we created priority. And then I was like, what if that happened in the gold medal match at the Olympics? People around the world would be like, what? And so some rules came into play. And they basically are trying to remove that. And so I'm gonna just, hold on, my screen is still rolling. 1 second. So the rules that you guys are gonna get, like we went all over these, you know, priority rules. Attached to it when you guys do get this is all the latest WSL priority rules. Now, like I said, working with the ISA and the technical committee, for me, the ISA and the WSL, they need to be on the same page. Like Olympics, we're using athletes from WSL, athletes from the ISA. We need to have universal language, same words, word for word, judging criteria, interference rules, and priority rules. Those are the backbone of surfing heats. So all our rules are basically going to be the same. This is just my presentation on the WSL ones because they, you know, came up with it and we copied and pasted it basically in our rule book. So we've all got the same things. It talks about, you know, intentional interferences, which, I mean, Gabriel basically came in and said, yeah, I dropped in on him. It was my intention to do that. Now, you know, there's a lot of different rules that came into play with priority. Like I said, it changed a lot of details. Like the list that I had is more basically how the ESA is going to use it at the regionals, going to use it at the Easterns. But it is good to know your rules at the highest level for when they come into play. For me, one of the biggest changes is they have different interference categories now. So you can see here, let me go ahead and try to increase that there for you guys just a little bit since my type's kind of small. Interference penalty number 1, that would be a non-priority interference where second highest scoring wave is cut in half. Now they have something called an interference penalty 2. That would be like a normal old priority interference. Second highest scoring ride will tally as a 0. Now you have something called interference penalty 3. And that's basically what happened in that heat that I just showed you with Medina and Abelli. And so basically when it's an intentional interference and it happens, or if it's a priority interference and it happens in the last 5 minutes on a wave that had potential to change the result, the interfering surfer is going to lose their highest scoring wave as a 0, and then they'll keep their second highest wave. So in that situation with Medina, that might have stopped him from doing it. And then of course, we have after that penalty 3, we also have grounds for disqualification. So disqualification is going to come down to something that was intentional, something that was unsportsmanlike, something that put the other surfer's safety in risk, things like that. So there are grounds there. Of course, like we talked about the surfer paddling back out the other day on the paddling interference, you have to be 100% sure of an intention. And sometimes that's a little bit hard to prove. It's still going to leave a huge gray area of whether that interference was, meant to or not, whether you're going to call, that priority interference. And these new categories is super complicated for the judges. I was talking to Tomo Arndt, the head judge from WSL the other day, and we were talking about these new rules, and he was like, yeah, now it's even more complicated for us because now we need to look at the potential of the wave that gets interfered on in the last 5 minutes and determine whether it had potential to turn the heat or not. So now there's lots of dynamics, lots of, like I said, evolution of these rules going on. But I'm just kind of mentioning some of these. I don't want to, confuse too much because I know the ESA, the USA Surfing Primes, the events that a lot of, national judges judge at and national competitors compete at aren't so much using that upper level, but it definitely helps to understand, where it's coming from. Let me go ahead and I won't go ahead and show that. So one of the, before I jump into the strategy and then start to close out the session, there's different dynamics. Like I talk about surfers reaching the primary takeoff zone. That's once again, the interpretation of the priority judge. It kind of changes from different venues. You might have a point break where it's all one direction and they normally start the wave like, sorry, my arm's disappearing here. And they start the wave from farther up the point, and usually where a heat starts, that's considered the primary takeoff zone. Now in a beach break, you have waves all over the place. A peak over here, a peak over there, and it can't be exactly where they started at because now they might have gotten drug 100 yards up the beach. So basically as a priority judge, what determines the priority takeoff zone? It's almost like you draw an imaginary line at the start of the takeoff zone, and that imaginary line runs all through the break. And so the surfers catch a wave, and once they paddle out and they cross that imaginary line, then they get priority. So as a surfer, you're paddling back out. Don't just paddle back out and sit on your board and be like, yeah, I'm in the takeoff zone, give me priority. If you're paddling out and you look over and your color's not up yet, keep on paddling. Don't stop. Don't tell the priority judge what to do. The priority judge is waiting for you to move far enough out that he considers that the primary takeoff zone. I saw a situation happen at the 2019 World Juniors in Huntington Beach, and well, it didn't involve Gabriel Medina, but it involved his sister, Sophie Medina. And she's a great surfer too. And it was quite interesting because I ended up in a long discussion with Medina's coach for about half an hour after that event or that heat. I decided to do that. I speak Portuguese fluently. I decided to do that conversation in Portuguese, which I kind of regretted because it would have went a lot slower in English. So here's the situation, and I bring it out now because I'm talking about the surfer crossing that imaginary line and not stopping until you are 100% sure that you did because the priority board flipped. Well, Sophie Medina, we'll call her yellow because I think she was in yellow. She was in second place in the heat. She caught a wave, she paddled back out, but it was Huntington Beach. So there was waves breaking a little farther out, kind of a midsection. She paddled back out and she sat down in the lineup, and she thought she had priority, second or third priority, whatever. She was in second place in the heat. She sat there floating up and down, never looked at the priority board to see that she didn't have her priority yet, and she continued to sit there. The girl in third place caught a wave, rode it to the inside, paddled back out, and sat right next to her in the lineup. Now both girls are sitting there in the lineup. No priority amongst both of them. And neither of them look at the priority board. For me, it was amazing. And so that they didn't look, not only one, but both of them, and they're both sitting there with no priority. So what happens in the heat? A set starts to form out the back, and the other girl who's in third place, blue, I think it was, she's a taller, bigger girl, and she sits higher in the lineup. It's almost like she saw the set first and she started to paddle. And as soon as she took 2 strokes, she got higher priority. And then they continued to paddle out. And when they got to the wave, then they looked up and saw that she had higher priority. The girl took the wave, surfed the score, and turned the heat. And Sophie was out. And it was like, nobody could understand how she was out there first, but the girl didn't have priority. In reality, neither of them looked. And then they took 2 more strokes, and then they got priority. So once again, keep on paddling out. It's that imaginary line that dictates who is in the primary takeoff zone. Now, a wave like lower trestles, that priority zone is going to change a lot. If it's just perfect south swell lowers, you're going to have, an A-frame, and you're going to have like the top of that A is the start of the wave. That's the primary takeoff zone. And that's where you need to reach to get your priority. But there's some days where it's mixed with a little bit of like west swell. And so it doesn't come in a perfect A. The right is a little bit more stretched out. And so it's kind of whenever you're in a zone to catch, one of the waves. So a little bit of interpretation there, and it changes from venue to venue, whether you're on point break, reef break, beach break. But super important to, look at those, keep it on the priority board. What was another one I was going to talk about? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit. Sorry, I got to X something out. Any more videos left? Nope. So now I'm going to move a little bit into strategy for the athletes out there, because I know we, according to Michelle, since they're going to be using priority at the regional events, is a great idea to, just get a little refresher on the priority rules. So let me go ahead and share one of the, priority. This is some of my priority tips that I just put out there for, some of them are pretty basic. If you're very experienced in priority, this might seem pretty repetitive. And if you're just getting into it, this is very useful information. So, basically in my training sessions that I do with some of the Groms when I train, I actually do priority training. So I have a set of flags that establish priority. So when we're doing practice heats, they know what priority order they have. And so it's really good to train and practice it. But I also put out another set of flags that tells them what placing they're in. Because I always say it's super important to understand the priority system and how it works and know what priority you have. But knowing your placing, like you listen up to the computer score and the announcer, and you know your situation, because your situation in the heat is going to dictate your strategy on how you use your priority. Because if you're in first place and you have first priority, or you're in second place, you're in advancing position, you're probably going to use your priority more defensively to keep the other surfers off from catching good waves. And if you're in fourth place and you have first priority, well, you need to catch a really good one. So it definitely, your placing in the heat has a lot to do with the strategy that you're going to use. So have it kind of broken down into, what you do with a higher priority and what you do with a lower priority. So I usually say with first or higher priority, be very patient to get the best wave possible at the same time without waiting too long. I mean, it's nice if you can go out and just wait for the excellent waves, but sometimes you wait all heat long and that excellent wave never comes. So that's why I say you don't want to wait too long. The next part of that would be use your priority to catch waves that you will keep in your score line. A lot of times I tell people, if it's the start of the heat, you have first priority by default or whatever. Don't necessarily wait for a 7 or an 8. Use your priority on, on the best wave you can get, but using it on a 4 or a 5 isn't a bad call, because at the end of the heat, in most heats, you can carry a 4 or a 5 to get through, and your other waves got to be good. So, use it on waves that you will keep in your score line. You don't want to use it on a 1 or a 2. That's just a waste of priority. Excuse me. Get a quick sip of water here. The other good thing to do is use your priority to keep your opponents from catching good waves. Now, like I said, the priority system created so everybody has opportunity, but if you can use your priority to catch good waves, and in catching good waves, you're keeping your opponents off from good waves, then you're using your priority like offense and defense at the very same time. Something else super important with high priority: do not catch the poor or the fair waves unless your opponent is outside the takeoff zone, or for some reason you need a really small score. Use your priority, like I say, on waves that are going to count. Don't use it on the bad ones unless, seeing if I had it written down below. So basically, what I hear from a lot of people is, oh, I took off on that poor wave, or I took off on that fair wave because I had last priority. I was like, yeah, you had last priority, but guess what? If you take off on too many bad waves, you're always going to be in fourth priority. You're never going to get third, second, and on up. Sometimes you just have to sit and wait. Now, don't necessarily sit and wait. If you can get a wave with low priority that you're going to keep in your score line, that's just getting busy when you don't have priority, and then wait for when your priority is going to come up. But like I say, with lower priority, or you want to be active, but don't be overactive on bad waves, because guess what? You'll always be in fourth priority. If you have priority and your opponent allows you to sit inside of them, be aware to keep them off of a good wave that they begin to ride, or have them risking interference. So this one, basically comes down to, let me pull it back up and 1 second. Yeah, so basically, another really good tactic is if you have first priority and it's getting down to the closing of a heat, as long as you don't remove yourself from the primary takeoff zone, sometimes you sit inside of your opponents and they know the scores they need, and you should be listening up too to hear the scores that they need to get through the heat. And then they need to decide whether they can get the wave on score on that. I'll use an example, and I'll actually use myself as an example. Like I talked the other day, I used to be a competitor, way back in the day coming up, but it was basically, all my judging years, I stopped competing. I stopped competing from basically about 1995. And the next time I really put on a contest jersey seriously was in 2015. So I was like 20 years out of a jersey, but I was coaching, I was judging, I was still super involved, and probably understood all the rules better than anybody. And so I decided to do a year of the WSA, and I qualified for the US Championships. And when I made it to the finals at US Championships was the last year they had the older divisions. It was senior men's, and the senior men's was at lower trestles. And I asked Greg Cruz, are we going to have priority rules? And he said, yes. I'm like, yes, bring it on. And so basically I used the strategy in the heats to take control of the heat. In the end, I started off with a good score. I dropped like an 8.83 on my opening wave, paddle back out, waited for everybody else to catch waves. Actually, in the beginning, I let everybody else go first. So then I got first priority by default. I got an 8.83 on my first wave. Paddle back out, everybody was sitting there, let everybody else go again, waited for a second good wave, got a 7 on it. Then it came down to the final 5 minutes of the heat, let everybody else catch waves, got my first priority again. And then it was a very inconsistent day. The other guy in the heat, who is very competitive and wins a lot of events too, he dropped an 8 in the heat. So now it was like, oh, I've got, a really high total, but the other guy's got an 8, and now he only needs basically another, I think it was like a high 7 or a low 8 or something. So he's right back in it. But guess what? I've got first priority, and it's inconsistent. So basically, I remained in the takeoff zone, but I let him sit out farther in the lineup than me, because, with this piece of the strategy, what happens if you're sitting out further than that person and they need the score? Well, you've got to decide if they can get the score, and then you got to paddle inside and keep them off or catch the wave so they can't ride it. Or what happens if you're sitting, floating in a lineup side by side with them? Now, once again, you see that wave and you got to decide if they want it and if the wave has that scoring potential. But me, I was like, okay, I'm going to sit inside of them. And if this person who's in second place paddles for this wave and it's a bad wave, well, I'm just going to let them go and hold my priority. But if they paddle for the wave and it's a good wave, well, now I'm going to use my priority to take that wave off them. And that's exactly what it happened. At the 1 minute, a good wave came in, but it was a 1-wave set. It probably had an 8-point potential, and I paddled right to the peak, took off on the left, and the heat ended right then. So once again, understanding the rules, how you can pull strategy out of it, super important. And that was just, a little bit of this letter F. So you can't do that at all breaks. It's a little bit harder, on a beach break, unless, the takeoff zone's a bit wide. So if you have first priority, letter G, if you have first priority, try to sit and wait for waves near your opponent as much as possible without putting yourself out of the desired position. So you have first priority, you can go wherever you want. Number one is you need to get on some scores, so you need to go to your desired position to get the scores. But if that desired position happens to be next to your opponent, well, double bonus. Now you're going to get a good wave, and you're going to keep your opponent off another wave. So first thing, focus on your own surfing. But like I said, if you can use it defensively as well, then, like I said, double bonus. Letter H is what we talked about earlier. Your priority ends when the heat ends. So if another surfer with lower priority is riding a wave, when the heat ends, do not drop in on them. Second, third, and fourth, or just let's call it lower priority. It's good to be very active in the lineup, especially with third and fourth, trying to pick up a good wave that your opponent lets pass by. Sometimes some athletes call it, the curse of first priority. You end up just waiting and you want to get good ones with first priority. And sometimes you let some, mid-range scores go by and your opponent's like, oh, thank you, I'm going to go on this. And they end up sometimes picking up really good scores on waves that maybe didn't look that good, or maybe it goes wave starved and there's not much opportunity. And, a couple of those waves you let go by ended up being some keys to the heat. So being active and sitting inside of your opponent, you will apply pressure for your opponent to make a mistake and give up their priority on a poor wave. So as well, like, if you've got last priority, you can paddle for as much as you want and not go, and you automatically get your fourth priority back. Sometimes just that, hustle and that pressure, paddling for a wave, your opponent with higher priority might be like, oh, he's looking at it. You kind of bait them in to paddle for the wave too. And then you stop paddling first, and then they lose their priority on you. So just little tactics within the priority system. As long as you remain in the takeoff zone with last priority, you can paddle for any wave by yourself and not lose your priority until you ride the wave. So with last priority, don't catch too many waves that will not go into your score line, because like I said before, you will always remain in last priority. I hate to hear the excuse, oh, but I was in last priority, I was gonna, I could paddle and go on that one. I said, yeah, but did you ever have first priority in that heat? They're like, no, I didn't. Letter E, you may ride the same wave as the surfer with first or higher priority and be scored normally, but you do not have any right of way for the wave and must not hinder your opponent's scoring potential in any way. Like explained that one a little bit earlier. Be careful paddling or riding the same wave, because the surfer with priority, they can do whatever they want on that wave, and they may attempt to give you an interference. We saw that one with Medina and Slater. Obviously, Medina could do whatever he wanted. So Slater had to be a little bit careful. Kind of hard to be careful when you're, flying out of the barrel and the lip's kind of crumbling down on you. But I think the judges, like I said, looked at that one, and Medina's choice was to go straight, so he wouldn't have scored anymore if Slater was there or not. Letter G, if you have second priority, try to sit and wait inside of or away from your opponent, but never outside of them. Sitting outside of them creates that dynamic that I was talking about with me, and my experience in using it. Also, if you have a second priority or you have a low priority, it doesn't really help to sit next to the person with first priority, because when the wave comes, they're going to have right of way for it. You really can't do anything. So it's nice to be up the beach a little bit and try to get one with nobody near you. But at the same time, there's also a little bit of dynamic as well. If it's getting down to the closing minutes of the heat, I would hear like, oh, I didn't want to, it didn't matter if I sat next to the guy, he had first priority. I'm like, yeah, but if you're in second priority and he's got first, say you're in second place, you're in first place and he's in second, but he's got first priority. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't do anything. Yeah, but if you sit next to him, guess what? He's only got one shot to paddle. As soon as he paddles and misses, well, it's going to be your chance now. Whereas if you're sitting at the beach and giving him lots of space, he can paddle and miss again before you can even get over to him. So once again, just dynamics and details. Situation, a couple situational things. I think I mentioned one of these. If you're paddling out to get first priority, don't stop paddling out to the primary takeoff zone until the disc changes or it's announced that you have priority. Yeah, I pretty much gave a good example of that one. Two-person priority. So if you have second priority and your opponent is paddling for a poor wave with the intent to catch it, do not paddle for the same wave. If he stops paddling and you continue paddling, he will regain first priority. That's what I was talking about earlier, where priority changes from one person to another and back over to the first person, and it was only one wave because nobody stopped paddling. And then with two-person priority, if you have second priority and you begin paddling for a poor fair wave that motivates your opponent to also paddle for the same wave, make sure that you stop paddling for the wave before he does. So that's just kind of drawing them in and then stop paddling first. By doing this, you've sucked them into giving up priority on a bad wave. So I think that was it on that as well on that page. So yeah, a couple, dynamics there. Definitely went over the priority rules in pretty good detail and then threw out a little bit of strategy there. Let's see, got a question come in whether the Longboard Open at the Northeast Regionals will be using priority. Michelle, I'm not sure if she's there. She sent me a list earlier of which divisions would be using priority. There she comes.
I'm here. It just takes me a while to figure out how to get back on here. Yes, open longboard is going to be priority at the Northeast Regionals at all of our regionals. So Ron, did you sign up for it, Ron? So just for you guys that are on here, just so you know, because of our regionals, in order to incorporate as many people as possible that want to compete at this level, we are going to still start with 6-man heats on several of those and then go down to the 4-man heats towards the finals, semifinals, things like that. So then the 6-man heats will not have priority, but then we will start priority in the second, third round.
Cool. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank
you. And I think that's, really, really great for the ESA to be doing. I don't think they've used priority in their past regional events. I think the Easterns in 2019 was probably the first time it's been used. And like I was saying before, it just really takes it to a higher level. It's more professional. I know they're, only using it in certain divisions. And, as it gets further down the line, perhaps they'll bring it into some of the other divisions as well. Sometimes it just depends on, what divisions that it's being run in, because sometimes it's more of a fundamental, division and the people are just still more concentrating on, the competitive side of it. And then you bring in the priority and it's a whole nother dynamic. And, if you're talking like the push and go divisions and things like that. It just creates way too much confusion. And, in the regional events, like she said, the 6-person heats won't have priority, but when it gets further on in the event and they're able to cut that format down into 4-person heats, that's when, the system really, starts to take hold and become, just more functional. It's kind of funny, because I talk about the 2-person, 3-person, 4-person priority heats, but the Olympics this year, we've got a very interesting dynamic, and round 2 has 5-man priority. Everybody goes, what? 5-man priority in the Olympics? Well, as a contest director, you will soon realize that certain amount of entries create perfect formats, and non-perfect entries create bad formats. And so the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, only allowed 20 men and 20 women in for surfing in its first year. There was no, do you want in the Olympics? Yes, we do. Okay, you get 20 and 20. And at first I was thinking, well, that's perfect marketing. It's the year 2020 and they let in 20. So I asked, Robert Fasul, the executive director, I'm like, why was that? And he said, well, they really try to eliminate on new sports the amount of athletes coming in every year. So they try to keep that contained. When surfing comes in as a sport, it means other sports lose athletes. So they try not to, ruffle feathers too much. So they allowed us with 20, but 20 doesn't break down so well. So all the heats have to have the same amount. So, the first idea was like, oh, four heats of 5 to get 20. And it was like, no, that sounds horrible. Last thing I want to do is open up surfing to the world with 5-person heats. Come on. So the next idea was, okay, we do 5 4-person heats, and that's what the first round is. And if you get first or second, then you jump to the third round, you skip around. But if you get third or fourth, well, technically you already lost in the event. So those people who got third and fourth in those 5 heats, that is at the 10, now we have 2 5-person heats, and it's priority system. So priority judge is going to have his hands full. The priority board is about as big as a house. It's giant. And so he's going to really have to keep an eye on it for 2 heats while it's 5-person, and then it'll go from that 5-person heat, it'll go to the third round. Then it's man on man, women on women heats all the way to the end. Then the format gets really clear right into the bronze medal match and the gold medal match. So going to be exciting. Not super stoked on the 5-person heats, but like I said, trying to do the best with the format. And once again, just stoked we got into the Olympics and hoping to put on a show for everybody around the world. That's pretty much, all I got to say about Olympics, and no, not about the Olympics. I got a lot to say on that, but about priority, like I said, it's, really the priority judge's call to look at it. I do have here on my list, somebody will probably answer the question later. And on my list, it says paddle and how much. That's interpretational up to the priority judge as well. So like I said, if you paddle for a wave and you missed it, and you have priority, you're gonna lose your priority. But how much can you paddle? Sometimes you don't even need to paddle. Like I said, you can just position yourself in a wave that keeps somebody else off, and you're gonna lose your priority, and your arms never even moved. It was just your positioning. Now, if you're paddling for a wave by yourself, the judges or the priority judge, they're often trying to determine whether a person was paddling with intent to catch the wave, or were they just paddling to look over the ledge at the potential of the wave? And that's a fine line. Usually you would say like, more than 2 committed strokes, and that's a paddle. And if they don't go, then it's a miss. But a lot of times you can take 1 stroke, kind of a second stroke, and if it's slow and be looking, and then when that third arm starts going, that's a full commitment. But depending on, you could, as well, you could position yourself in a wave on a no paddle takeoff too. So if you just position yourself in a wave to catch it and you don't go, it doesn't even matter that the arms weren't even moving. So it's a fine line. It's interpretational, with a priority judge. I remember, having a long discussion with, like I said, at the ESA events, I'm the technical director, along with the contest director who's from Brazil, Marcus Bocal. And the technical director has to go down and explain the interference calls and explain a lot of stuff with the coaches, like I'm on the front line. So the priority judge took priority away from a surfer. It affected the rest of the heat. And basically it was like Huntington Beach, and the wave stopped out the back, and the surfer was moving from the outside to the inside. And he kind of basically paddled too hard on a swell line, which he probably couldn't have caught, but he paddled too hard on a wave that he probably couldn't catch. And so the priority judge took priority off of him. For me, I didn't think he lost priority, but I could kind of see it either way. And like I say, you put yourself in that position, and sometimes it might go your way, or you might lose your priority and it won't go your way. But I was in, a pretty heated argument with the French coach on basically, whether you could lose priority on a wave that didn't break. And I'm like, well, if you paddled hard enough that you wanted to get that wave, then you open the door for the interpretation of the priority judge to come in. So once again, super important for the priority judge to watch the rides, to watch the paddles, watch the positioning. One of the better priority judges that we use in the United States from the West Coast, he doesn't even watch the rides. You asked him, oh, what'd Red do on that wave? He didn't see it. He doesn't even watch any of the surfing. All he's watching is where the surfers are at when they reach the takeoff zone and how much they paddle for the wave. He could care less about what they're doing on the rides. His job is focus on that. And that's tough. Like I said, requires probably even more focus than the judging, and it's extremely valuable position. And once again, evolution of it, there's always, new rules coming out. Like I said, the professional level rules got really, really complicated now. And lots of things in there. And I think eventually those kind of rules will trickle down to the lower levels, so to speak. But a lot of organizations are just still running the fundamental basics behind priority heats. And like I said, attempt to bring out the best surfing and get everybody on the right waves that they're waiting for. So yeah, that's about all I've got to say today. If you guys have any questions, we're gonna stay online for a little bit longer. You can put them in the chat, or you can, a few people in the past have unmuted themselves and talked. And I thank everybody for joining me again once today, talking about priority, frothing out about surfing. Good if you guys are only joining today's class. Good luck in the upcoming events with priority. And I wish everybody the best. And if you're here for the next class, we're going to talk a little bit more directly about the judging, some judging tips, what makes a good character for a judge, key waves that, you need to remember, how to scale, things like that. And then a little bit of review on the entire course. So that pretty much wraps it up, and I'll kind of turn it over to Michelle and she'll close it out, and then we'll open it up to questions. So once again, thanks everybody for joining me today. I appreciate it, and see you guys hopefully soon.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, before everybody gets off of here, I just want to, and as you guys are possibly thinking of questions, I just want to let everybody know that for those of you who are competing these 4 courses with Eric last week and this week, we are going to invite you, if you're interested, and if you will be attending our regional events, your respective regional event, we're going to invite you guys up to the scaffolding so you can observe the judging by the professional judges, and you could possibly maybe sit in on a heat or two and maybe shadow judge. So if you guys are interested, anybody on here who's been taking this course and you're interested, please reach out to me immediately so we can kind of get you on the schedule to come up, because we want to be able to fit everybody up there at certain times, one at a time, and not mess up the judges who are working, but to kind of give you an idea of what goes on up there, and to kind of sit with how they actually judge and listen to the head judge and watch the priority and things like that. So we encourage you guys to do that. There is a question here in the chat from Mario.
Yep, I'll go ahead and take that one.
Go ahead.
So the question is, what marks the official beginning and end of the heat? The horn, the flags, or the announcer? Basically, it should be the horn. The horn, it's nice when the horn is hooked up to an electric timer, a digital timer, so that, when that timer reaches 0, the horn goes whether there's somebody sitting there watching the counter or not. It's nice when you have a commentator that's watching it and he can accompany it and give a countdown, because it helps the judges watch to see if there's going to be a ride in the heat or just after the heat. So it's always nice to be the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but sometimes there is no announcer, or the announcer might be on break, or a lot of times they just don't even catch it. So you can't rely on the announcer. It should be the horn. If you don't have an automatic horn hooked up to a digital timer, then you really need to have somebody assigned to the position of horns and flags. And their really only position should be watching the clock and blowing that boat horn, air can or whatever, when the time reaches 0. So that's if you're giving somebody that job to multitask with that job, you're setting yourself up for something to go wrong. I can guarantee it. And that's kind of funny, because that brings out a story for me. And back to my contest days, and it was the end of the heat, and you can see how passionate I am about judging and rules. And I think probably one of the reasons I got so into judging and I wanted to do it the best, because I wanted to make sure nobody suffered any thing wrong in the heat. What happened to me in my heat, and I told everybody on the first day I was on the US surf team, but I was the number 5 surfer. I was the alternate surfer. In one of those team trials, which I had done well in Texas, I didn't do very good in Florida, and it was the 3rd event in Oceanside at my local break. And I had basically won a heat, had my watch going, surfed my last wave to the beach, and the horn should have blown. And the timekeeper, who was multitasking, did not blow the horn. The heat went 2 minutes longer than it should have. And the surfers got rides. I'm standing on the beach watching them ride, watching them get good scores. And I went from 1st to 3rd in that final 2 minutes of the heat. And the announcer told me, well, the timekeeper's watch is official. And I'm like, yeah, but you just ripped me off. So that's why I have the understanding of do not multitask. That's a very important job. A lot of times you think, oh, the heat started 15 minutes later, I just got to blow it again. But if you need to be really focused at the start and the end. Like I said, it's the start of the horn, which is going to signal the beginning and end of that heat. So that was my experience. It still kind of gets me, if you can tell. So if we got any more questions, then fire away, whether it's priority or anything else too, because that's what I'm here for, you guys.
Well, oh, wait, there's Q&A. Hold on. Nope, nothing from, oh, wait, Mario had one back at 7:42, but you may have answered it. Oh, that was it, which is the official start and finish of heat flags. Sorry, you just asked that one, answered that one.
Yep. Yeah, sorry on the question and answer. I didn't always have it popped up.
I forgot to remind everybody to do it in the chat. We'll remember that tomorrow.
No worries.
All right, guys. Well, if you think of any questions tonight, bring them tomorrow, because maybe when we start off tomorrow, you can answer some questions that they may think about overnight and tomorrow.
Somebody was asking about the first 2 sessions that we did last week.
Yes, they are recorded. We're just going to, when we get the one finished tomorrow, we're going to upload all 4 of them for ESA members to be able to log into and watch at any time. But we obviously encourage you to attend live, so you have this opportunity to ask any questions that you may have, because you don't get that on the recorded one. All right, it looks like people are hopping off, so I guess we'll call this a night and get ready for one more tomorrow night. Eric, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of your time and all of the information.
No problem. Always happy to share the knowledge. We've got a deep vault of lots of stories and information and knowledge that I've gained over the years, and I figure the more I can share it with make more judges better judges and more athletes better athletes, the better the whole system gets.
That's exactly right. All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful night, and we will see you guys tomorrow night at 7 p.m. same time. Look for another email to come later in the day tomorrow with a new link to come on. And I guess we'll see you all tomorrow.
Right on. Thanks, Michelle. I'll
Have
see
a good
everyone
night.
tomorrow. Bye-bye.